How's it going, guys? This is your host Ludinus with an introduction to Tekken 7's character modding process. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to get from that to this. Before we get started though, I want to introduce you to the process and what tools you're going to need. So we're going to be following the original custom mesh guide, and you can find it linked down below. I won't be following it to a T, but it'll be our baseline because this is where custom mesh modding all started. The process is fairly simple, and if you have experience with Blender or the Unreal Engine, it'll even be simpler. All the tools that we'll need are at the top, and I won't be showing you how to install them all, but I will leave a link for them down in the description. First, we'll use umodel to extract the assets as GLTF files. If you happen to be modding Noctis or Geese, you'll need to grab the decryption tool from the description. Now we'll import the GLTF files along with Venom's 3D model into Blender. I'll use Blender to edit the skeleton, then I'm gonna export the model in two pieces as FBX files. Then I'll import these two FBX files along with Venom's textures into a custom Unreal Engine that was made specifically for modding Tekken, so I would not recommend trying to use the one from the Epic Store. Please don't try that, it just won't work. You'll also need the Tekken game project, and you can find it by heading to the links in the description. We'll let the engine cook those files up, and once it's done, we should end up with the modded UAsset files we're looking for. We'll pack everything up using the extracting and packing tools. And that's it. We're gonna get our mod.
Get ready for the next battle. Round 1. Fight.
I'll open umodel, and I'll right-click the Tekken AC file and then select Open File Location. I'll copy the address and paste it where it says Path to Game Files. I'll override Game Detection and then select Unreal Engine from the first drop-down menu and then Tekken 7 from the second.
KO. Round 2. Fight.
First, I'll go to Game, and then Character, Item, and Meshes. You guys see this folder structure right there? This is something that you'll run into a lot, so I do recommend that you keep it in mind. The Meshes folder is where you're gonna find a bunch of meaningless acronyms at first glance. Most of these acronyms actually stand for a particular Tekken character. The suit and the helmet are common items, and I'm gonna find them in the common folder. So I'll go there, and I'll start with the suit first. I'm gonna go to full body, and then common, body full. How do you even pronounce this?
Hi Junko.
Whatever it is, I'll open it up and go to the Meshes folder that's inside it. There are a lot of files within it, but I know Armor Kings is the first because of the dev's naming convention. So I'll go ahead and open that file. I'll take a screenshot of this thing because we're going to be referring to the information on here a lot. And you can toggle the material info by pressing M. I'll open the asset browser again by pressing O, and then I'm going to export it. I'm happy with the export path, so I'm not going to change that, but I'll make sure that both the skeletal mesh and the static mesh are set to GLTF 2.0, and that the texture is in PNG format. I'll do the same steps for the helmet now. The helmet would be located in the full head folder, and I'll find it inside Common, Headful, Knight's Helm. And I'm gonna take a screenshot like I did earlier because I need to refer to the information that's on here. I'll press O to open up the Asset Explorer, then I'm gonna export it with the same settings as before. I'll show you where the files got exported to. I'll go to Tutorial Export, Game, Character, Item, Meshes, Common, and I'll just go with the full body here, into that, and then Meshes.
Great. Round 3. Fight.
Unfortunately, if you're trying to mod Noctis or Geese, you're gonna have to do a few extra steps. As an example, I'll take you to where Geese's files are at. Geese's abbreviation is MRY, so I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna use the face as the example here. So if you try to open it, and even if you try clicking fast to confuse umodel, it's just never gonna happen. To work around this, you gotta save the file first by going to the arrow next to tools and then selecting Save Selected Packages. I'm happy with the save path, and I'm not gonna bother with the directory structure, so I'm gonna uncheck that, but you can keep it if you like. Now I'll go to where the file got saved. I should find it in the folder that's called Tutorial Saved. I'll move it to the side for now and open up the encryption and decryption tools. Then I'll drag the UAsset file onto decrypt.bat. It'll decrypt and override the file, but we're not quite finished here because we have yet to export it. I'll open up umodel and use the same settings as before, but this time I'm gonna give it the path to this decrypted asset instead. umodel won't have much to show, but now at least we can access the file and export it. I'll press O to open up the asset browser, and now I'll export it with the same settings as we did before. And I just want to show you where it got exported to.
Perfect. You win. Round 1. Fight!
So open up Blender. I already have mine open here, and I'll be saving everything on the folder you're seeing on the right. We'll take care of the scene in just a bit, but let's make sure that we have all the plugins we need. Go to File, Import, and notice how there's an option that says XNA-Lara/XPS. This is a plugin that we're going to be using, so I'm going to show you how to set it up. Go to Edit and Preferences. Now click on Install. Find where you downloaded the zip file. It should be called XNA-Lara Mesh, so I'm going to search for that. I have 2 versions downloaded, but I have one of them already installed, so I'm not going to click on Install Add-on, but you should if you haven't already. I'll search here for the add-on just to show you that it's already installed and enabled. I'm not going to repeat the same steps for the other add-on that I linked earlier, but I will show you that it's already installed and enabled as well. Now we just have to get rid of whatever we have on the scene.
Well, let me tell you folks, deleting the default cube in Blender is just tremendous. It's all about making Blender great again, believe me. You know, we were getting tired of looking at that same old cube all the time. So we made the decision to delete it, and let me tell you, it was a tremendous decision. Now, some people, the fake news media, they'll tell you that deleting the default cube is a bad thing, but let me tell you, it's not. It's a fantastic thing. It opens up all sorts of new possibilities for Blender. You can create your own shapes, your own designs. It's tremendous, believe me. And let me tell you, the process of deleting that cube, it's very simple. You just go into the scene and you select the cube and boom, it's gone. It's that easy, folks. And let me tell you, the Blender community, they're very happy about it. They're thanking us. They're saying it's the best thing that ever happened to Blender. So there you have it, folks.
Now press N to open up the side panel, and go to Tekken 7 SKCH. Then click on Scene Setup.
Great! Round 2. Fight!
Go to File, Import, and you'll notice a lot of options, but let's start with importing our GLTF files. Going back to my tutorial export folder, and now I'll import the suit first. With the mesh selected, I'm going to press on dot on my numpad to zoom out a bit. Similarly, I'll also import the helmet. I'll find where the GLTF file is, then I'm going to import it the same way we did before. Now the last thing we need to add is Venom's model. Instead of heading up to the file menu, I'm just going to go ahead and press on Q because I've added it as a shortcut. I'll find Venom's XPS file and I'm going to double click on that to add it to the scene. You'll notice that Venom shows up in the outliner but not in the 3D viewport, so I'm going to click on his armature and then I'm going to press on numpad dot to zoom in. We're pretty much done here, but I'll change the viewport shading by holding Z and then selecting material.
Great! Round 2. Fight!
I hid the GLTF skeletons and meshes to make the scene more clear. If you want to do the same, go to the top right hand corner for the outliner and then click on the eye icon. From this point onward, what I'm going to show you is my approach. If you ask 2 modders about what you should do, you'll get different ideas depending on the type of project you're working on and on the end result that you're looking for. Since the body proportions for Venom match up closely with Armor King, I'll be converting Venom's skeleton into Armor King's skeleton. It's optional, but I'll simplify the skeleton because it's going to make it easier to deal with. Before we go on, I just want to add more context to why I'm doing this. And don't worry about the green lines. Blender is fine. Trust me.
Help me.
A common trend that you'll find commonly in rigs that are out there is that there are a few main bones and there are some helper bones. To figure out which is which, we need to switch to pose mode first. I'll start off by showing you how a main bone works. With the bone selected, you'll find its name at the top left hand corner. The reason why this is a main bone is because if you rotate it, it moves the whole limb as you can see. I'll press Alt-R to reset the rotation of the bone. I've moved some bones off camera to another layer just to make them a bit more visible. Now let's try and rotate the bone around and see if it actually moves the limb the way we expect. Yeah, this is a helper bone, so we're gonna add a new entry to the simplifier. Taking a closer look at the bone's name, you'll notice that it has a twist in its name. That part is unique for this specific type of bone, so we'll go ahead and add that to the simplifier. We'll do a similar thing to the other bones, so I'm gonna speed through this bit. I've added unused just based on my experience with skeletons. Notice how the mesh is split into pieces. I'll join these meshes together because they all share the same material. And you can check what type of material a mesh uses by heading to the Properties panel and clicking on the Materials tab. I'll explain a bit more about materials in a later part of this video. For now, make sure that the armature is selected and then click on Simplify to simplify the skeleton. I've realized that I missed the Adjust Bones, but that's okay because I can get rid of them using the Merge Bones tool. Now we'll move to the second part of converting our skeleton, which is to rename the bones. For that, we'll use the Bone Renamer. I'll load it up, and I'll add a new list to it. I'll change the name of the new list to Venom. The names on the right are the bone names that Tekken use. Now we basically want to change the names for Venom's bones into these names. Instead of comparing Venom's skeleton with the GLTF skeletons, I'm gonna press on autofill. The feature is still experimental, but it should fill out for Venom's skeleton. Even if it was successfully completed, I recommend checking the list yourself and make sure that the names match up. Notice how the thumb starts from arm left finger 1 and then it jumps straight to arm left finger 3. That's because it skipped the index finger, so I'm gonna go ahead and fix that. This might not necessarily apply in your case, so I'm gonna speed through this bit. Before I click on rename, I want to make sure that you understand why I did all that. So on the properties panel, go to the stickman guy. Expand the viewport display and check names. I'll get closer to the finger bones to show you why I did what I did. Finger 1 is the thumb and finger 2 is the index finger, so I made the modifications on the list to reflect that. After confirming that the skeletons match up, we're going to select the skeleton and click on rename. I'll just take a quick look to check that the names make sense. We're done with the bone renamer now, so we can close it. And open up the T-poser. Venom's model is already in T-pose, but I'm doing that to straighten the thumbs. Let me go ahead and adjust the view so you can see what I mean. Now if I click on T-pose, the thumbs will straighten out. I'll take a look at the other bones and see how good they're posed. The head got rotated slightly up, so I'm gonna rotate it back down a bit. And at this point, I'm just looking around to see if everything looks good. Now if you're happy with how your mesh is posed, you're gonna have to apply the pose. Applying the pose will mean that the skeleton in edit mode will be the same as it is in pose mode. If we don't apply the pose, Tekken will ignore everything we did in pose mode. Before moving on to the next step and using the pose snapper, we need to fix the GLTF skeletons. So I'll go ahead and unhide the skeleton and the mesh for the suit. Venom's body is so much smaller than the suit is, but we'll take care of that later. I'll open up the skeleton generator, select Armor King for my character. I'm gonna keep it as GLTF, but I'll change this to main bones only. And I'll click on generate. This will create a brand new skeleton for Armor King that'll act as reference. The newly generated reference skeleton is called AKI here, so I'll left click on it first, and holding control I'm gonna left click on the suit's skeleton, and then I'm gonna click on fix bones. This will make sure that all the bones have the correct orientation once we export them. I'm about to delete the reference skeleton, but I forgot to do the same steps to fix the skeleton that comes with the helmet. I'll realize that later in the video and fix it, but I recommend that you follow the exact same steps that we did earlier just with the helmet. Now I'll zoom back to Venom. Expand the pose snapper again, and change the snapping mode to advanced. You might want to try the simple mode first though and see how it looks. I'll select the skeleton for the suit first, and then while holding shift I'll select Venom's skeleton. And now we can actually press snap bones. The snapper scaled our model appropriately. At this point I'm checking how the model looks, but if you're not happy with what you got, I'll show you how you can make manual adjustments in just a bit. Notice how the body got slightly stretched. Despite that though, I still think it looks decent for now, so I'm gonna apply the pose. I'll unhide the suit mesh just for reference. Now this bone right here is causing the hand to poke out a bit. If I went to pose mode and adjust it, it'll also affect some other bones with it. Notice how the pinky also moves. I'll undo what I just did and I'm gonna disable the hierarchy. Now if I rotate this bone, the pinky will stay in its place. We'll have to re-enable the hierarchy once we're done, but only after applying the pose. And now the hand looks good. I'll do the exact same thing but to the other hand. I'll re-enable the hierarchy again and make sure that the pose has been properly applied. Everything looks good so far, so I'm gonna go to object mode and making a duplicate of the armature by pressing Shift plus D. I'm just moving it so that you can actually see that it got duplicated. You don't really have to change their name or anything, but my undiagnosed OCD kicked in and I felt like being organized. You will need to have a dedicated skeleton for the head mesh and the body mesh, which is why I'm naming them as such. This is the part where I delete the extra mesh and rename the remaining one. I'll unhide the skeleton that comes with the suit, and I'll select it first, then I'll hold control and left click the skeleton that's supposed to be for Venom's body, and I'll click on fix bones. I'll do a similar process for the head skeleton, but remember I haven't fixed it earlier and I'm still oblivious to that fact. Neither the GLTF skeleton nor Venom's head skeleton should look like a cell phone tower. I'll be fixing the skeleton later, but for now I'm gonna delete both GLTF skeletons along with their meshes. Now that we are sort of done with the skeletons, I'm gonna go ahead and split the mesh in two. With the mesh selected, I'm gonna press on tab to go to edit mode. Then I'm gonna head to the UV editing tab. I'll enable UV sync selection to be able to select vertices through the UV. At this point, what I'm trying to do is select all the vertices from Venom's head and separate it from the rest of his body. With these vertices selected, I'm gonna make sure that my mouse is hovering over the 3D viewport, and then I'm gonna press on P to separate by selection. I'll move back to the layout tab to show you that the head was separated from the rest of the body. I'll change the name of the head mesh and the body mesh into something more appropriate. I'll select the head mesh first, unhide the skeleton for the head, and then while holding Ctrl, select that as well. Now with the cursor hovering over the 3D viewport, I'm gonna press Ctrl and P and then select Armature Deform. That should link the head mesh with the head skeleton.
Great! Round 3. Fight!
I hid the skeletons while I was off camera because I want to focus on the meshes and the material they use. With the mesh selected, I'm gonna go to the Material tab on the Properties panel. The material slot names are what you're gonna see in the Unreal Engine. But to take a closer look at how the material works, we have to head to the Shading tab. If you take a closer look at the shader node, you'll be able to tell which image file corresponds to what type of texture map. The minimum maps we need for Tekken is the Diffuse, Normal, and Mask map. Please check out the guide linked below for more details. In my case, the head and the body use the exact same material as you can see here. Now that I know what each image file is for, I'm gonna head back to the Layout tab to start exporting.
Great! Final round. Fight!
I'm starting to unhide the skeletons, but first let's save our blend file. To open up the save window, press Ctrl Shift and S. I'll just call this one Venom. I want to export the body first, so I'll unhide the skeleton, and then I'll delete the head. I'll save the file again, but I'll call it Venom Body. With the skeleton selected, I'll press on FBX Export. The FBX file will also be called Venom Body, and it'll override the old file that I had there. I want to export the head too, but it's gone from this project, so I'll go to File, Open Recent. And then I'll select the Venom project that we saved earlier. It's up to you if you want to save your current project, but I won't. And now I'll repeat the steps with the head. The only difference with this one is that I'll fix the skeleton because I forgot to do so earlier. I'll show you how to do that in a sec, but for now just follow the same steps, just without clicking on FBX Export yet, unless you already fixed the skeleton. This is the part when I realize that something looks wrong with the skeleton. And in order to fix it, I need to generate the reference again. I'll select the reference first, and then while holding Shift, I'll select the skeleton that I want to fix. And now I can click on Fix Bones. I'll get rid of the reference skeleton and then select the skeleton that I want to export. I don't have to save the blend file again, I can just click on Export.
Great! You win! Round 1. Fight!
I'll open up the Unreal Engine, and if you have everything set up correctly, you should be seeing the Tekken game project. As of recording this video, I have the pre-release version, as you can see. If you don't see it, then you just have to open it up once by clicking on Browse and opening up the U project folder. It's already there for me, so I don't have to do that. I'm gonna right-click the project and open it up in File Explorer first. The folder opened up in the background, so I'm gonna go ahead and grab it. I'll go back to where I have all my projects, and I'm gonna make a copy of the pre-release project. I recommend doing this for every new modding project, although this habit will cost you space. But even so, it'll still be better than waiting for the engine to cook so many assets. Anyway, I'll rename the copied project folder into something more appropriate. Before we start this project to the engine, we want to make a few modifications to the content. So I'll open it up, and then go to Content, and then Character. We want to set up the folder structure in our project so that everything is ready once we start it up. To do that, go to where you exported the GLTF files, go into Game, Character, and then copy the item folder to your project. We only need the folder structure in it, not the files within it. So I'll start deleting all the files that are inside of it. And we're not going to be reusing any materials or textures, so I'm going to delete those folders completely. And I'll delete everything that's inside the meshes folder. I'll do the exact same thing for the helmet too, so I'm going to speed things up a bit here. At this point, I'm just taking a quick look to make sure that I haven't missed anything. Now we're ready to start up the project through the Unreal Engine, but first we gotta tell UE where it's at. And we can do that by opening up the U project file within it. If you happen to get this warning, click on More Options and then skip Conversion.
KO! Round 2. Fight!
If it's your first time starting the project, you'll probably be greeted by these shaders. We'll talk more about those later, but for now let's start by importing the full body. On the counter browser, I'll head over to where the GLTF file for the body mesh would be. In my case, it would be here, so I'll drag and drop Venom's body FBX onto here. I'm gonna have to change a few settings on the FBX import options. Most of the cast use the base skeleton, so I'm gonna select that. I know that because of this line. I'll change the normal import method into import normals and tangents, and I'll uncheck create physics asset. We're pretty much done here, but we need to uncheck import materials and import textures. We can now import everything. I'll open it up just to check the scale. That is exactly how big you want the model to be. We'll change the name of the asset to match exactly what the GLTF's name was. I'll explain why we do this in a sec, but for now find where you exported the GLTF file. Now rename the U asset to have the exact same name as the GLTF. If we take a close look at the name and the path of the asset, it needs to match up exactly with what we see on umodel. And it does here in our case. I will repeat these steps for the head mesh. And the same conditions apply here as well. Now we'll begin importing the textures. The head and the body share the same textures, so I'm gonna put everything next to the body. It doesn't really matter where you put the textures, but I recommend keeping them next to the mesh that uses them. I'll drag and drop these next to the body mesh. You'll have to revert the changes that happen to the normal map and make sure that the compression settings is set to DXT1/5 and disable the sRGB while you're at it. At this point we're pretty much done importing the textures, and right now I'm just checking to see if everything looks right.
KO! Round 3. Fight!
So to create the materials, first we need to go to the material folder. I'll create an instance from this one that's called MCH base, and I'll call it MI Venom Skin. The name is not important, but the location is, so I'm gonna grab it and drag it to where I have the textures. Now I'll open it up to start assigning the textures to it. I'll enable the diffuse map and search for Venom's diffuse texture. For the mask map, I'll use a transparent texture. The reason why I'm using a transparent texture for the mask map is because it controls the colors of the material. We won't be able to change the colors like we would with other customization items. But that's fine for the purposes of this video. I'm gonna go back to the material tab, and I'll repeat the same process for the normal map and the specular map. You don't have to enable and assign a specular map if your character does not have one. Anyways, we're done with the material, so now I can actually assign it to the meshes. I'll search for the material that we just set up earlier and assign it to the body. Now I'll assign the same material to the head mesh because it uses it too. Once we're done with everything, we're gonna save all and cook our files. We can do so by going to File and clicking on Cook Content for Windows. Oh, and your antivirus program might freak out about what's going on, but trust me, there's nothing to worry about. While the engine cooks the files up, I want to show you where we can find the cooked assets. I'll head to where the project folder is at. In my case, it was called AK Tutorial Venom. Then I'll open up Saved, and then Cooked.
KO! Final round. Fight!
To create a physics asset, I'm going to right-click on the mesh, go to Create, Physics Asset, and then select Create and Assign. I won't change any of the default settings. The first thing that I'll do is select all the bones through the hierarchy window. If you don't already see it, go up to Window and make sure that hierarchy is checked. With all the bones selected, I'm going to change their physics type into kinematic. And I'll disable collision between them. I'll move in closer to the head and delete the jawbone capsule. It'll just get in the way. Now I'll select most of the tongue bone capsules and change them to simulated because I want them to move. I'll run a quick test and see how it looks. Yeah, that's not quite what I'm looking for here, so I'm gonna try and freeze the second tongue bone. That looks a bit better. What I'll do to make more adjustments is to tweak the constraints a bit. I wish I could speedrun you through this part of the process, but in reality there is no fixed formula here. I'm basically playing around with the constraint values and seeing what works. I'll adjust the swing limits just to have a bit more controlled movement. To apply force to the body, you need to hold Shift and right-click and drag the mouse around. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to leave it at that, but I just want to let you know that there are other values that you can tinker and play with. You can access these values by changing the mode back to body. You can tweak the linear damping and angular damping values among other things. Once we're done with our adjustments, we can save all the changes and then cook content for Windows.
Time up. You win.
Round 1. Fight!
I'll open up the packer, then run the generate config.bat. I already have the config file generated, but I'll regenerate it to show you how that works. It'll ask you for Tekken's path, and for that I'm gonna right-click the exe and then open the file location. I'll copy the path and paste it back onto that window. After you press on enter, it'll let you know that the configuration was generated successfully. Now I'll just head into the packing folder so we can actually get started.
Perfect! Final round. Fight!
I'll create a new folder within the packing folder and I'll just name it whatever I want the mod to be named. We're going to fill out the contents of that folder with whatever UE cooked for us. So I'll go ahead and open up the folder that has the cooked files. Now I'll create a folder that's called Tekken Game, and go into the Tekken Game folder and create a folder that's called Content. I'm basically trying to create a similar folder structure in our mod. I'll keep on going with this until I've reached my files. I know my modded file is within the character folder, so I don't really care about the developer folder or any of these other folders. Right now you can actually copy and paste the items folder because it only has our modded assets. But I got used to this habit, so I'm gonna keep on going until I realize that soon. Again, you could just literally copy and paste the meshes folder here. I'm not sure why I created it first, but I actually end up doing that. Now we got all the files taken care of. These U assets are actually our modded files. Now I'll go all the way back to the packing folder that we started with. I'll grab the mod folder that we just created and drag it into pack compressed auto encrypt bat. A window will pop up and I'll press enter to proceed. When it's done, it's going to tell you where you can find the pack file, so I'm going to go there and show you.
KO. You win.
Round 1. Fight!
I know I've shown you the results already, so this part seems kinda pointless. But I just want to emphasize that you have to go and select the customization items individually to activate the mod.
KO! Round 2. Fight!
If you were wondering whether or not you can add more customization slots, the short answer is you can. In this round, I'm going to show you how we can exactly accomplish that. Let's head back to UE. Before we do anything, there are two main things we need to remember for our meshes. The item position and that part that's highlighted from the name. The same would apply to the full body mesh too. I'll explain what we're going to be doing with these two pieces of information in a bit. But first, let's change a few things. First, I'll go all the way back to the content folder and create a new folder that's called modders. Then I'm going to go into the modders folder and create another folder, and you can call that folder whatever name you want. Yet again, I'm going to go into it and create another folder, but this time I'm going to call it Venom. And you can call it whatever you want as long as it helps you identify which mod is it for. We'll start moving our assets into this folder shortly. I'll start with the head mesh first. I'll drag both the physics asset and the mesh and move them into the Venom folder. You can copy them instead if you still want them to replace the helmet too. Now we'll do the same thing with the body mesh and put everything inside that Venom folder. Once we got everything there, we're gonna right click and create a new character item. And you can call this character item whatever you like, I just personally prefer sticking to the dev convention. I'll open it up and change the mesh type into skeletal mesh. For the character ID, I'll search for Armor King's abbreviation, which is AKI. I'm dedicating this character item file for Venom's body, so I'm gonna choose full body because of what I talked about earlier. Now I'll link Venom's body mesh by selecting it as a source skeletal mesh. By the way, you don't have to stick with the weird name for the mesh if you're using this method, but I'm not gonna change it because it's not really important. Anyway, we're gonna have to take a close look at two things: the character abbreviation and how the item position is written. What we're about to do soon is case sensitive, so that is why this is important. Anyways, with these four set, we're done with the CI, so we can close it. I'm gonna repeat the same steps and create a character item for the helmet. Again, don't worry too much about what the CI is called, just make sure that you can identify it. The mesh type and character will be pretty much the same, but the item position and source mesh won't. The item position has to match what we talked about earlier. We're pretty much done setting up this folder, so now we're gonna get started with the customized character item files. Go to the items folder and create a new folder within it called exactly customize. Now go into the customize folder and create a new folder that has the same abbreviation as your character. It has to match exactly with item 3 on the picture. Now we'll head into the AKI folder and create two new folders that match exactly with the item positions that we talked about earlier. The names of these two has to match up exactly with what's inside the character items that we created. I'll head into the full body folder first and create a customized character item. The name of the item has to start with CCI underscore, and then you can follow it up with whatever you like. You'll have to remember what the part after the CCI underscore is though. Now I'll create a similar file for the full head. And just like the full body, it has to start with CCI underscore. The rest can be anything up to you as long as you'll remember it. In my case, I'll be referring to this part of the name later. So let's open it up and link it with a CI file. I'll do so by changing the character item option into Venom's head CI file. I'll go back to the body CCI and do similar steps there as well. Of course, I have to make sure that I'm selecting the character item for the body this time. With that finished, all we're left with is just saving everything and cooking the files again. So right now the engine is already done cooking the files and I'm gonna go ahead and access them. My project is called Tutorial AK Venom, so I'm gonna head there. And I'll navigate all the way down to the content folder. Now I'll move it to the side and open up the packer. And I'll go into the content folder for my mod there as well. Now I'll begin by copying and pasting the modders folder into it. And then I'm gonna go to character and copy the cooked items folder onto it. Now I'll go all the way back and pack the mod the way we did before. I've showed you this already and nothing changed, but we do have to make one additional step after we pack the mod. I don't really need any of these two anymore, so I'm gonna close them and open up where Tekken is installed. You'll notice right away that there's something called Tekken Data Patcher, and this is the tool that we're gonna be using to create customization items. After downloading it and extracting it, I'm gonna run it once so that it can extract the customization data. And when it finishes, I'm gonna go to Tekken Game Content Mod Data. And I'll keep on opening the files up until I get to what's inside. We're not gonna be editing this file, but we're gonna be using it as reference, so I'll back it up just in case. I'll paste it next to the exe file so that it doesn't actually read it. Anyway, I'm gonna almost go back to where I was, and I'll create a new folder next to the Tekken project. You can name it anything you want, so I'm gonna literally name it whatever. And now I'm gonna go back into the Tekken project and grab the CSV file. I'll paste it inside whatever, then I'm gonna change its name. And you can call it whatever you like too. I'll open up the file with Notepad and move it to the left of the screen. And I'll select all the lines within it and delete them because we're not gonna need them. I'll save the changes that I just made by pressing Ctrl and S. Now that this one is cleared, I'm gonna go ahead and open up the original item CSV file. You'll understand soon why that part was highlighted, but I'll go all the way back to the top and then move this to the side. I'll search this file for the name that I told you guys about earlier. It's number 2 in the image. Now I'll open up the find tool and write that down. Once I found it, I'm gonna copy and paste the whole line that has it onto the empty file. I'll change the first value into something that is close but it isn't used with any other item. I know that 48413 isn't allocated yet, so I'm gonna use that. What you're seeing right now is the item CSV file. Notice how when it goes from Marduk to Armor King, it jumps all the way up to 480,001. If we keep on going down this list for Armor King, we'll only get to 480,412. Then it jumps straight to 490,000 for Julia. So as long as we stay below 490,000 but above 480,412, we should be good. And that's why I used 48413 here. Now I'll change this part to match up exactly with my CCI file. My CCI was called this, if you guys remember. I only have to copy the highlighted part of the name, so I shouldn't add the CCI underscore part. And I'll do pretty much the same thing for the head. I'll search for the helmet using part of its name as before, and I'll copy its whole line from the item CSV file to the whatever CSV file. I'll change the first number to the next value, which is 48414. And I'll modify this part of the name to match with the CCI file. We're pretty much done here really. All I have to do is make sure that I save the changes, go back to where we have the Tekken data patcher, and we'll run the patcher before we start the game. You only have to do this once when you want to add new customization items. Once it's done, it should show you that the files were added successfully.